All right, Gabe, opening day tomorrow. Tell me a little bit about this Indiana bunch and what you know about them. From what I've read, they're a little bit young, but some people are picking them as maybe one of the turnaround teams in 23.
Yeah, it's so hard to tell. I mean, from an offensive standpoint, they only have four returning pitchers, and they've got a lot of transfers, some junior college guys that are mixed in there. And I guess when you're scouting a team like that, it's always hard to tell when you get a transfer or a junior college kid. Um, just what they did last year. Well, they're with a new coaching staff, a new pitching coach, a new year. Did they add a pitch? Did they subtract a pitch? Did something change mechanically that helped them or hurt them? It's really hard to tell opening day, but you get as much information on them as you can, and give your guys, to me, always a very simplistic approach early in the season where they can be freed up mentally and go attack them.
Hmm. How about your lineup? I know you've been tinkering with that a little bit, trying to find the right combinations. Is that something you feel like you're close to, or will you use the opening series to kind of go after that a little bit more?
Yeah, they're definitely going to use the opening series and really the opening probably several weeks of making sure we get a look at guys in game time situations. We've got some returning veterans, but we also have a lot of new guys, some transfers thrown in there, some freshmen. It's one thing to do it in the fall. It's another thing to do it in January and February early as you're getting ready to the season. It's another thing when the jerseys get put on and the lights come on, and some guys sometimes shrink a little bit, and other times guys rise to the top. And so the lineup is definitely not set. There's some guys that are going to have a little more rope than other guys, but there's no doubt that when the game starts, Coach Thompson's always talking about the players make the lineup out, and that'll be very true. You perform, you'll stay, and if you don't, other guys are going to get opportunities.
Hmm. What is it like for you guys coming off your success, the World Series last year, and having the SEC West, as we talked a little bit last week on the show, um, as tough as it is, and you guys were, I think, ranked 6 or 7 in the preseason by the media or whoever it was. But does your team look at that? Do you look at that, or does it just not matter in the SEC West?
Um, we look at it, and it doesn't matter in the SEC West. So it's both those things. We want at the end of the day to win every game we play, and whether that's Indiana on opening day or if it's LSU or Alabama or Florida, whoever it might be down the road. What people think of us before the season starts is really not important. At the same time, it's always pretty motivating to see it come out, and it's like no matter what we've done the year before or the past 5 years, it people's opinion is still that we're not playing at the top of our division. Now, having said that, you can be fourth, fifth, sixth, maybe even seventh in the West and still have a team good enough to go to Omaha. And I would say that just knowing our competition, having played against them last year, knowing what everybody's got back, I don't think there's a team in the West that you could say right now is probably not going to have the talent to go to Omaha. That's just a very it's just true. It's just true. Period. End of story. And so it doesn't really matter. And at the same time, that'll be a part of who we are. That last year, if you followed our team, they got the expression going bad news, and that came out of being picked last, not expected to do much, and that we turned that bad news into bad news for people who we were going to play, and that was a very player-led thing. But they took it personally, and it wound up being very motivational.
Yeah. I guess the glaring difference when at least from the fans' perspective, when you look at the roster from last year to this year, is there's no Sunny D.
Yep.
Uh, how much of a difference will that make? And talk about some of the guys that might step in there and fill that gap.
I think we're going to be a really, really different type of lineup than we were last year. I think replacing Sonny is not something you're going to ask any one person to do. 380 with 22 home runs doesn't come around every year. Doesn't come around every 5 or 6 years. Usually that's kind of a Frank Thomas-esque season. In fact, I think you would have a hard time finding anyone but Frank and Sonny to say that anyone had a better season. I shouldn't say that. Good buddy Todd Faulkner will have a issue with me if I do that. He hit 422 with 22 home runs, and so it's been done a handful of times, but it's like once every 10 or 15 years. Having said that, I think we have a chance to be a little more deeper in the power category. Now, some guys have got to perform for that to happen, but you look at one of our transfers, Cooper McMurray from Kansas, has got the ability to hit the ball out of the ballpark, and he's got a pretty good eye at the plate as well for a big guy. Can use the backside of the field, so he's got a chance a little bit. You look at Justin Kirby, transfer from Kent State, kind of the same thing. Right-handed, not left-handed, but he's got a little power, got the ability to hit the ball out of the ballpark. You know, Bobby Pierce played 2/3 of the season, hit 10 home runs last year. Nate LaRue has shown the ability to hit the ball out of the ballpark. We got to work on his average from last year, but again, in 2/3 of the season, roughly in the at bats, you know, he hit 6, which, you know, he's got a chance to be double digits in a full season. And then we got some other guys. You know, is Bryson Ware gonna be able to keep going through a season? He's definitely got the potential to put the ball out of the ballpark. Gavin Miller's a freshman who will see some time at third base as well. Ike Irish is an extremely talented freshman. Will probably start the year as our DH. Has definitely got the ability to hit the ball all fields and put the ball out of the ballpark. So I think it's more of a group effort rather than one person standing in there and trying to take the place of a guy who is as good a hitter as the SEC's seen in a while.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about Nate, and he's from our area, played at McGill-Tulane. Tell me about him and what kind of upside he has offensively and what you're working on with him in the preseason.
Well, Nate has been on quite the journey since he's been at Auburn. His upside is still way up there. I think he's just starting to realize what that can be. And to talk about his offense, you can't leave out the defense. I mean, that's what got him in the lineup last year, was that, man, his catching, his defensive skills just went through the roof. His catch and throw, but also his framing of pitches, his getting strikes called, blocking balls. All those things went to an elite level last year, and that's going to stay. But you know, he's got big time power. I think if you miss on the inner third of the plate, Nate's going to hurt you. He's going to hit doubles and home runs, and his challenge has been keeping the front side shut long enough that he's able to hit the outer third of the plate. Last year, when teams needed a strike, they could go out there, and he had a hard time dealing with it. And we've worked really hard in the fall and the off season to basically not take anything away from what he does well, which is get to his pull side, but give him the opportunity to really dominate the outer half of the plate, force pitchers then to throw him in, and then he can do real damage. And to be honest with you, he's shown the ability to do some damage on balls away from him as well. He got a brand new stance, different approach, and the stance kind of was his own making. It's worked for him, and I'm hoping as the season goes on that man, he really gets comfortable. He can be a big weapon for us.
Yeah. And Bobby, of course, did some things last year for you. And most people I talk to look to him as a leader on this year's team. Do you see him stepping into that role and becoming one of your leaders and one of the guys that has a really kind of a breakout season this year?
Yeah, there's no doubt. He's one of the more just naturally gifted, talented players that we have. He's been around baseball a lot, and I think one of the keys to me of him being a really, really good leader for our team is he's been through it a little bit. I mean, he's been hurt. He's been not good enough yet. He's been hurt. He had to, even last year at the very beginning of the year, coming off an injury. We weren't comfortable enough with where he was to even take him on our first road trip the year, which was a really bitter pill for him to swallow, and I got it. I would have been bitter for me to swallow as well. And then yet when he got the opportunity to step in there as a starter, he wasn't going to let anybody take it away from him. And so for younger guys who are maybe frustrated at the lack of playing time or thinking they should be done more, he's such a great resource, and he has just cemented himself as one of our better players, if not the best player that we have, that we're going to count on to be there day in, day out.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned some of the newcomers. I hear a lot about Justin, obviously. Is he somebody that can step in right away and help you?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, Justin been through a lot of college baseball, played a lot of college baseball. Obviously, it's a little different level in the SEC and Kent State, but that guy's had success, and he's had success at a high level. He expects it of himself. I think he's going to start with the opportunity to be somewhere in the middle of our lineup and help us be a little bit of a run producer, play in the outfield. But he's going to have to earn it every day too. There's a lot of competition that goes on with this team. This is one of the deeper teams that we've had as far as the ability. I feel like if a guy's struggling, if a guy not producing, gets hurt, we've got some guys that can step into those roles.
Mm-hmm. As the hitting coach at Auburn, do you try to, obviously guys have different talents and try to do different things, but you talked about Nate and his new stance. How much do you try to have the Gabe Gross theory, or how much do you try to let guys do kind of implement their own things?
Yeah, I think it's both. I kind of just answered a question like that earlier. I definitely have my way of teaching in my theory. At the same time, part of that is that I believe very strongly that no two hitters are alike, and there's very few times where you can apply the exact same lessons you learned with one hitter that he had success with, transfer that to another hitter, and expect him to have the same amount of success. Concepts, talking about hitting, I mean, there's certain fundamentals that you're going to have to do right in order to be able to hit at a high level. But within that, not only how an individual's body works is a lot of times very different, but also how their mind works, how they're geared, plays into being a good hitter. And sometimes that's a process with a guy. And I think Nate's has really taken ownership of what he's doing. One of the times that I see the biggest growth in hitters is when they really figure out who they are. And when they figure out who they are, they a lot of the different mind thoughts of I'm going to try to do this, I'm going to try to do that, and I'm going to do this or not do that, and all that goes away, and they get very single-minded. And when that happens, man, it's powerful. And I think Nate's kind of really taken ownership. I think he knows who he is. I think he knows what his strengths and his weaknesses are, and he's been attacking it with kind of singularity of purpose.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that. When they find out who they are, what exactly does that mean? And do you remember that when you were a player, when you found out?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a quick example, and it's the easiest one to think of if people have been watching Auburn baseball, especially last year. Blake Rambush came in last year. I hit with all our guys individually when they first get here, 30 minutes, just the two of us, just to get to know a little bit the new guys and let them start to get to know me, get back on the same page with the returners and see where they are. But Blake Rambush walks in the cage, and we're hitting a little bit, and I asked him a lot of questions, and I said, well, tell me what you do. What's your strengths? What's your weaknesses? What do you think about at the plate? And he said, well, I got to junior college. I was going to try to hit all the balls out of the ballpark. I realized that's not who I am. I wasn't very good at it. I was going to try to, pull the ball. I was going to try to hit the other way. I was going to hit it where it was pitched, and still thinking too much about, trying to do too much damage, hitting home runs. And I figured out that wasn't who I am. And he said, last year I figured out I can hit the ball in the middle of the field to the opposite side as good as anybody. And that's what I do. Mm-hmm. And if you watched our season last year, that's what that dude did. And he did it every day, and he worked on it. He was going to be inside the ball. He was going to drive the ball to the middle of the field. He was going to drive the ball the other way. He wasn't going to get beat much by off-speed pitches because he's letting the ball travel so much to have that approach. And he just did it every day, and he didn't come off of it. We worked on a few different things. We worked on, hey, if they're really able to go in consistently, how do I attack an inside fastball and get them out of there? And he was able to do that a little bit. But for the most part, that guy dominated the middle outer half of the plate to the middle opposite field side of the field, and went from a guy who wasn't drafted to a guy who hit 327 or whatever he hit last year, got himself drafted, and had a really good year, first year of pro ball, and going to have a chance to work his way through the minor leagues and maybe be a big leaguer one day.
Yeah. Do you remember that moment for Gabe Gross when you realized who you were?
There were two different moments that I talk about, and I talk about them our guys all the time. And I don't know how to explain to kids these days because it's so much different, but I didn't, the draft out of high school was this mythical thing that happened to people way far out away from me. I didn't have any idea about being drafted. I didn't know anything much about hitting. I just knew that I wanted to compete. I wanted to win. And when they threw it in there, for the most part, I could hit it. And I got to Auburn and two different things. Steve Renfro was my hitting coach and started talking to me about approach a little bit. And I know I took a fastball that was a really good pitcher's pitch on an 0-0 count and hit a beautiful 3-hopper to the shortstop, and they threw me out. And he called me everything but a nice, upstanding citizen after that, and told me if I was too stupid to realize that you don't swing at pitchers' pitches, that you can't drive early in the count when you're 6'3" and 215 pounds and got a little juice, then he couldn't put me in the lineup anymore. And I also took a fastball for strike 3 one day, and that same blur of about 30 seconds of unrelenting pressure from my hitting coach to not be that stupid, to do that. It redefined who I was in that moment. And when I realized that, hey, early in the count, I'm going to look for a pitch to drive. It's going to be my pitch, and what I'm expecting, what I'm looking for, and I'm not going to miss it. Every time the ball shows up there, my barrel is going to be there. And that for me was a ball slightly off the center of the plate, that I could drive in the left center field gap. And I also felt if my mind was there, I could react to the ball that's slightly off the inside part of the plate, and I could get to the pull side gap very easily, staying in the middle of the field. But ball I could drive. And then when they got to 2 strikes, I became a really, really good 2-strike hitter. And when I comboed those two things in an approach that, man, I'm not going to make an out swinging at a pitcher's pitch early in the count. And if they dot 2 on me, that's fine. I'm going to 2-strike hit, and I can make a pitcher's life miserable doing that. But if they miss early, my barrel's going to be there. And no matter what happens, I'm going to put pitches in pitchers, and I'm going to fight with 2 strikes. And when those two things happened, I feel like I really took off.
Yeah. I was looking at some of the guys' profiles before we came on here, and they were born about 2000 when
Yep.
you played at Auburn. Do they still ask you about that? Do they know who Gabe Gross was at Auburn? Do they come to you to ask you what it was like?
They do a little bit. I don't very, very purposely. They realized that I was a good player at Auburn. They realized I had a big league career. I don't make a big deal out of it. Probably the biggest deal I have of different things is when I'm trying to show them a concept or teaching a concept that I can actually step up to a tee and demonstrate it still. Or get in the, I don't hit very often with them, but if I need to take a swing or two, it's like, man, this is what I'm trying to say that I want you to do. Something like that can happen, but it's not about me. It's about them. It's their time to have their careers and have the sun shine on them. And, I had my time at Auburn, which I wouldn't trade anything in the world for. And they realize that my background, but, for the most part, this is about them.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you about Auburn is, in your career is, I hear a lot about Cadillac and Zach Etheridge on the football staff being Auburn guys and how important that is. Do you feel like you bring that to the Auburn baseball staff and people can come to you and ask you those questions about what about Auburn? What does this mean? Or that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody can sell Auburn like I can sell Auburn. I have loved this place all my life. Obviously, my dad played football here in the 70s, Amazing's team in 72, played on another great team in 74, and been coming up here to football games, baseball games. I was actually in the stadium when John Powell recorded his NCAA strikeout record. I've been coming up here for a long, long time, had a career here, had a professional career. Now I'm back, and I'm very, very thankful that Coach Thompson asked me to join his staff and be a part of this program. And when kids come in here, man, it's hard to sell something that you don't really love. And I think when you really love something, it's very easy to sell it. And I think it just comes out in everything that I talk about, whether it's just the city itself, the university, how those two things blend, the lifestyle that these kids have while they're here in a small town, but a small town athlete that in a city that absolutely loves their athletes, and the Auburn family throughout the state of Alabama and really the country and the world. how much they love athletics and pour into their athletes, and how that will affect them the rest of their lives. This is not just a 3 or 4 and a transfer, a year or two decision. This is a rest of your life decision that you'll be a part of this family, and how it's affected my life. Obviously, I'm still very much a part of what this university is. So yes, I absolutely see myself in that role. And we have kids come in, especially position players, that I'm involved recruiting everybody, but obviously position players are where I spend more time with those guys, and they definitely get it from me.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, as you mentioned, coming from an athletic family, your brother played college football, your dad played at Auburn. Number one, do you remember a specific game growing up, a football game that you went to that sticks in your memory? And number two, I was going to ask you, I can't exactly remember in your career, but was there one particular point you remember? A lot of people probably don't remember you played football, but was there one particular moment you remember, like, it's baseball, it's not football?
Oh man, that was a lot of different things. I remember the '89 Iron Bowl. I think there's about 3 million people who said they were there. I actually was there in that game. That was the first Auburn, Alabama game I'd ever been to. The intensity of the stadium, everybody talks about it. It was so real. I remember that till the day I die. The '93 Iron Bowl, the one that came back again, and Auburn was playing for an undefeated season. Very, very special memories for me. Growing up, I can't remember the year exactly, but we beat Florida State in Jordan-Hare. It might have been '89 too, or something like that. I remember the whole stadium doing the tomahawk chop after it was over, and um, went to the Sugar Bowl, Syracuse and Auburn in '88. I remember that. Obviously, a little later in my life, but John Powell strikeout to break the NCAA record from a baseball point of view. Remember all those things. Very, very special moments for me, and even as a dad now, being able to share that with my son and my daughter living here. We've been to pretty much every game. For the last 8 or 9 years. So a lot of special moments that I remember that really stick out to me. You asked about when I knew just baseball, and
Yeah.
I loved playing different sports. Was a 3-sport athlete in high school. Any kids that are watching, man, if you enjoy playing sports, play all of them. Please don't just specialize, especially not when you're 9 or 10 years old. That absolutely kills me. If you're going to be good enough to play at a high level, then you're a good enough athlete that when you're young, you can play multiple sports. And I would argue it even helps you play baseball or other sports at a high level to play multiple sports. But anyway, moving on from that, it really wasn't until, I got to Auburn. I did both my freshman year, toward the end of, really actually at the beginning of my baseball year. Coach Baird told me that my freshman year that multiple scouts had told him that they could really see me being a high round, maybe in a first round draft pick at the end of my career. And again, out of high school, that wasn't even a thought in my brain. And so to come into college and all of a sudden, like, you might be a first rounder, that was nuts. And then really coming into the next year, without going into a whole lot of details, trying to play both sports, new coach and Coach Tuberville, he didn't recruit me. Terry Bowden did. Can't say it was high on his priority list to have his quarterback playing both sports, but shortly into that second year, I look up, I'm being asked to be on some special teams, and all the way down to about third string. And I felt like if I was going to get the starting job back, I probably needed to stop baseball and go full scale into football and try to pursue that. And if I wasn't willing to do that, really was it worth the time away from baseball, the chance of injury on a special team, the other factors that go into that. And if the answer at the end of the year was end of the day was, I felt like my highest ceiling was probably in baseball. The chance to make my living for a decent amount of time after college was highest in baseball, and a lot of prayer, a lot of talking with people that I trusted, finally led me to that decision.
Yeah. What's it going to be like? I'm sure you've had a taste of it in the preseason, but what's it going to be like tomorrow in the dugout without Hudson there?
Man, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed coaching with that guy for a couple of years. You talking about, I think from the outside looking in, guys probably think he's pretty calm and, he's just kind of good old Tim. And man, that motor runs hot when he's competing. And I know it did as a player, got to play against him some while we were in the big leagues, and it did as a coach. His love for the team, teammates, his coaches, how he treats everybody, his competitive spirit, it's going to be different. I love Rock. I look forward to going to battle with him every day for this next year. But Tim will be missed. He's kind of hung around a little bit, come back in the office a couple times, and I think his season has started at Lee Scott Academy, and he's over there with Cade, his oldest son. And man, I'm just really proud for him. He's getting to experience a baseball season with him and his son, coach and player, father and son. That's really special. But man, it was great for him to be in the dugout and like I say, go to battle with him for a couple of years together.